Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Pursuant to NJSA 10:4, the Open Public Meetings Act, notice of this duly and regularly scheduled meeting of the Jackson Township Zoning Board of Adjustment has been published and posted in all appropriate locations.
Ooh, excuse me, sorry. Roll call, please. Oh, wait, excuse me, Gina. Do we have to swear Gina in first? Or appoint her first?
As we know, our recording secretary, Elizabeth Ramrup, is out on maternity leave. The township has assigned our assistant zoning officer, Gina Tumullo, to act as the recording secretary in her absence. I would ask that the board consider this and if appropriate, make a motion to appoint Ms. Tumullo as the interim recording secretary. So with that, I need a motion in a second.
Yeah, through the chair, I'd like to make that a motion.
I'll second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein? Dr. Hudak? Oh, sorry, Mr. Hudak? My apologies. Oh, sorry. Ms. Parnes? Yes. Ms. Rosal? Yes. Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Motion passes. You've been appointed as the interim recording secretary. Congratulations.
Thank you all for your patience.
My understanding is that you'll also be acting as the zoning officer tonight. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, very good. So you'll be sworn in with the professionals at the right time. Thank you.
Excuse me. Roll call now, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Here?
Dr. Hofstein? Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnes? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Martins?
Here.
Mr. Stafford Smith?
Here.
Ms. Bradley?
Here. Do we have any resolutions this evening, Mr. Murphy?
We do. We have three of them. This evening, we have resolution number 2024-48. That's the resolution granting variance relief for an in-ground swimming pool, play set, swing set, and shed on property located at 239 Jackson Pines Road, Block 14001, Lot 6. Eligible to vote on this particular resolution are Mr. Hudak, Dr. Hofstein, Mr. Hyman, Ms. Parnes, Ms. Rosal, Mr. Stafford Smith, and Ms. Bradley.
What was the last one, sir?
Ms. Bradley.
Ms. Bradley.
You need a motion and a second.
Need a motion and a second, please?
Motion?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein? Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnes? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Now we have resolution number 2024-49. It's resolution granting variance relief for a 33 foot by 30 foot by 20 foot single housekeeping unit addition on an undersized lot for property located at 10 Calvary Court, Block 3902, Lot 95. Eligible to vote on this resolution. One moment, please. Ms. Parnes, Mr. Stafford Smith, Dr. Hofstein, Mr. Hudak, Ms. Rosal, Mr. Martins, and Ms. Bradley.
Need a motion and a second, please?
Second.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Hofstein? Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnes? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Finally, we have Resolution 2024-50. That's a resolution granting variance relief for a 6-foot-high solid fence in the front yard where it's not permitted for property located at 932 Anderson Road, Block 2801, Lot 81. Eligible to vote on this particular resolution are Dr. Hofstein, Mr. Hudak, Ms. Parnes, Ms. Rosal, Mr. Martins, Mr. Stafford Smith, and Ms. Bradley.
Roll call, please.
Dr. Hofstein? Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnes? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
That concludes the resolutions for this evening.
Okay, do we have any minutes for this evening?
I was advised by the board's secretary, Dawn DiAugustino, that there were no minutes provided by Ms. Ramrup for approval this evening.
Okay. All right, I have a voucher for the recording secretary, the acting recording secretary for this evening from Jackson Township in the amount of $175. We need a motion and a second to pay the voucher, please.
Move to approve.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Dr. Hofstein? Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnes? Ms. Rosal? Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes. Any announcements this evening, Mr. Murphy?
We do have one, if you'll just bear with me for one moment, Madam Chair. This evening, application number 2, which is Tracy Place LLC, Block 4201, Lot 10 in the R1 zone. This is variance number 3520. This application has been carried to the January 15th, 2025 meeting of the Jackson Township Zoning Board of Adjustment. The applicant has waived time, and there will be no additional notice. So this is the notice for the January 15th meeting. That concludes this evening's announcements.
Okay, and we need to swear in the professionals, please.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments that you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Yes.
If you would each please state your name and your positions with the board.
Evan Hill, Board Engineer.
Ernie Peters, Board Planner.
Gina Tumalo, Assistant Zoning Officer.
Thank you very much.
No executive session this evening, correct, Mr. Murphy?
Not this evening, Madam Chair. I do anticipate one perhaps at the next meeting, if not, then the first meeting in December.
Okay, no matters for discussion, or I should say, are there any matters for discussion?
Not this evening, Madam Chair.
Okay. And no administrative approval, so we are going to move to applicant number 1. I can't see. JPO Jackson LP, Grand Harmony, amended preliminary and final site plan, 837-1. Ms. Jennings?
Yes, thank you. Good evening. For the record, I'm Donna Jennings from the law firm of Walentz, Goldman, and Spitzer on behalf of the applicant. As the board is aware, we're here this evening seeking amended preliminary and final major site plan approval to construct an inclusionary housing development on property located at Harmony Road and formerly identified as Block 4801, lots 5, 6, 8, 9, and 10, and now known as Block 5801, Lot 5.01 on the township's tax maps. The property is approximately 45 acres and is located in the LC zoning district. Back in March of 2020, the board adopted a resolution granting a use variance to the applicant's predecessor in interest to permit the development of the property with 202 townhome units, including 40 affordable housing units. A use variance was necessary because the LC zone does not permit multifamily housing. The board also granted a C variance to permit the height of the accessory clubhouse to exceed the height permitted in the LC zone for an accessory structure. On January 19, 2022, the board adopted a resolution granting preliminary and final major site plan approval to permit the construction of the 202-unit townhouse inclusionary housing development, including common amenities and related improvements proposed by the applicant. The applicant is now seeking to amend the preliminary and final major site plan approval to modify the 2022 approved site plan. In sum, the modifications are a reduction in the total number of buildings from 25 to 24, a reduction in the total number of units from 202 to 195. The affordable units will remain at 40, so the reduction is in the market rate units only, which actually increases the percentage of affordable units in this project from the original 20%, so slightly over 20%. The affordable housing units will be clustered in the southwestern portion of the site instead of being integrated amongst the market rate units. All the market rate units will have 3 bedrooms and a basement. 18 of the market rate units will have a 1-car garage, and the remaining market rate units will have a 2-car garage. All market rate unit basements will have ingress and egress windows, and there's a new amenity package with respect to the tot lots and the other amenities on the site, which will be more particularly described by the site engineer, and we're also increasing the square footage and the height of the clubhouse. The applicant is also seeking 1C variance from ordinance section 244-55D relating to the height of the clubhouse, which is an accessory structure. Mr. Stevens will get into the specific details, but this clubhouse is a little bit higher than the one that was already approved, so we're increasing the bulk variance for that particular structure. In support of the proposal, the applicant will rely on the direct testimony of 2 witnesses, Bill Stevens, sitting to my left, the applicant's engineer and planner, and Malky Rubb, the applicant's professional architect. We are in receipt of 2 reports, one from the board planner dated October 29th and one dated October 31st, 2024. And I believe we might also have one from somebody else, but I can't recall. Was there any other reports?
Not that I,
Okay,
yeah, not
we
that I
got it.
recall.
So with that, we'd like to have our first witness sworn in.
Good evening, Mr. Stevens. If you would please raise your right hand.
Good evening.
Good evening. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments that you're about to present before the board will represent the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. If you'd please state your name, your affiliation, and your credentials.
William Stevens, Stevens. I am a professional engineer and a professional planner, licensed to practice here in the state of New Jersey. And I've been appearing in that capacity in front of this board for probably more than the last 3 decades.
Mr. Stevens, this board accepts your credentials.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good evening.
Okay, then if you could, Mr. Stevens, I know I gave a brief summary of why we're here, and I know you've been involved in this application for some time. So if you would, please describe the property and what was originally approved, and then walk us through the proposed changes, and if you can rely on any exhibits, if you just mark them and identify them for the record. Thank you.
I'd be happy to, yes. So my office prepared an exhibit package, which I'd like to hand out. They're all pre-marked.
So the record will accept the pre-marking and incorporate that into the record. Thank you.
Anthony also has the exhibit, so he has them displayed on the board, and so they can be seen online as well. The first exhibit is an aerial photograph prepared by my office. This is based on a flight that was taken July 1, 2024. Shows the subject site in the center. It is the disturbed site that you see. The property boundary shown in yellow, highlighted around the site, and then the disturbed area being the area of construction for the subject site. As Ms. Jennings said in her opening remarks, this project previously received approval, went through resolution compliance, and was placed under construction. So we have made substantial improvements to this site already. The majority of the on-site utilities are in, the detention basins that are located around the recreation area. The later side stop working. The recreation area is in the center of the job. The board will recall there's a circular road system that goes out to Harmony Road with a couple of cul-de-sacs that come off it, and then the center of the project. The 2 detention basins or rain gardens that were located in the center are already constructed, as well as the final detention basin before outfalling into the wetlands. So all of that has been constructed. We also have curb built from Harmony Road up Grand Harmony Boulevard, which is the first street that comes into the center of the job, this area. And then we have the curb and stone for the pavement built about halfway around the proposed circle. So we have a lot of improvements in, including the majority of the utilities are also in. So I wanted the board to be aware that this job is, thank you, I don't know why I'm struggling with that. The point is that the job is substantially under construction. A lot of the infrastructure is already built, and we're not proposing to change any of that. We are making some minor changes to the site. So having said that, as Ms. Jennings said, the property is located in the limited commercial zone, and we did receive a use variance from this board to build this job, as well as the preliminary and final major site plan approval. To the figure this one out. There we go. So located to the north and to the east of the site, it's basically residential homes. It's Carlson Court across Harmony Road from the subject site. And then County Line Road is located just to the bottom of the map, and there are commercial sites located along the bottom of the site. Also, as Ms. Jennings said, we received a C variance for this project for building height for the clubhouse. In the LC zone, accessory structures are limited to 15 feet in height. We received a variance from this board for the clubhouse for this facility to 19.83 feet. And tonight we are seeking to raise that a little bit further to 27 feet. We'll go into more testimony about that a little further on in my presentation. The original site plan approval was for 202 units, including 40 affordable units. We are now proposing to reduce those units down to a total of 195 units, but the affordable units will remain. There will be 40 affordable units in this housing project. Anthony, if we could move over to Exhibit A3. So Exhibit A3 shows the plan that is being presented to the board this evening and shows the areas that we're looking to change on the site. And those areas generally are the areas inside where the recreational component is. We're looking to make some small changes there. And then also to change a cul-de-sac that was previously approved, known as Serenity Court, located at the southern part of the map, which is where we would like to relocate the COA units for the project. The board may recall that the prior approval, we had 10 10-unit buildings. In those 10-unit buildings, we were going to build 4 stack flats for the affordable units in the middle of those buildings. That became problematic going through the design and potential construction of these buildings, and the applicant has determined that it would be better to separate them, put them on their own for a whole host of reasons, which we'll also get into a little bit further on. So we're going to change those 10-unit buildings into 8-unit buildings, reduce the number of units in those buildings, and then relocate those 40 units to the southern quadrant of the site. So we're proposing these 3 buildings located in the southern site, which will be the COA units, 3 separate buildings. There will be 20 first-floor units that will have 2 bedrooms, and there will be 20 second-floor units, which will also have 3 bedrooms. The reasons why we're really looking to make this change, and this really is the biggest change to the project, is that we think this is a better planning alternative, moving these units outside of the 10-unit buildings and clustering them into a cul-de-sac or a court of their own, mostly for management purposes. I don't need to explain to this board that the COA rules are complicated. The marketing, sale, and the system that goes into this is complex. There have to be very special things that have to happen for the COA to qualify for the township's plan, and the applicant's proposal is to have a third party manage that for them. They're going to build them, but they have the ability to have somebody else manage all this so that it's done properly, somebody who specializes in doing COA housing.
Excuse me, so Mr. Stevens, you are stating that a different builder will be constructing the COLA housing?
No, I believe that my client, JP Orleans, will be building it. They're going to have somebody else to manage the sale of it. So, Dr. Austin, I know you know about these things, but perhaps for the other board members, there's different qualification levels that go into who can get these units, and then there's a whole lottery system that goes into it. It's complex. It's a lot for a person to manage who's not familiar with that type of thing. So this is what we're seeing in all of our multifamily developments now. We are segregating our COA units out, and generally it's being managed by somebody else other than the developer themselves, because JP Orleans isn't an affordable housing developer. That's not what they do. They're a for-profit company, and they're building homes for market rate units. It's not their function to build affordable housing. So that's really what this is about. And I think as the board sees other multifamily projects here in town, this is now the preferred way to build COA. We like to see them separated and moved out so that the whole thing can be segregated into itself. The approach is much more cost efficient also, and that is one of the things that the COA rules is trying to drive, to make affordable housing more cost efficient for the people that are required to build it. And then the one thing that is, well, it's paramount to me as the design engineer is ADA compliance. Everybody today, they all want external entrances to these ground floor units. And when we have that, when we have an exterior entrance to the ground floor unit, that means that they all have to be handicapped accessible, every single one of them. And it becomes a very difficult assignment to make the grades work when we have them in the middle of other buildings. It honestly became almost an impossible task. So by segregating them here and building them into a pad themselves, we can much easier comply with the ADA rules, and we'll end up with what we think is a superior product. So that's one of the big reasons in my mind that we ended up doing that. I think it's important for the board to understand, and it was in your planner's letter asking us to address the affordable housing plan. This project is not in, or well, it wasn't in Jackson Township's affordable housing plan when we first proposed it. This was a negotiation with this board for this project that we entered into in good faith many years ago, and so it's really a bonus to Jackson Township's affordable housing plans. We're not in the plan, but it's a bonus to the plan, all of which will be worked out through the township administrators themselves.
I think just if I could add, because it's more of a legal issue, I'm sure many of you know that the fourth round affordable housing has started and Jackson got hit with a pretty large number. So these will go towards your fourth round obligation because you already satisfied your third round obligation when we got this use variance application. We were not within the plan that was blessed by the Superior Court of New Jersey. So this is already into your fourth round.
Yeah, just to expand on that, our fourth round COA number is 954 affordable housing units. So that's pretty significant because I think it was somewhere around the 300 mark before, something of that nature. That's a pretty significant increase. So I do agree with that particular sentiment. I presume there's no issue with equal access to the amenities, all the things of that nature. I just want to put that on the record, that the affordable housing units will have the same access.
Yes,
and
they're part of
use
this project, and we'll have all access to the amenity package in the project, as every other resident would.
Thank you.
One of the other changes that we were looking at is adding, one of the other changes will be, we had a mixture of units in the prior plan. We are now looking to make all of the units 3-bedroom units. So all the market rate units will have 3 bedrooms, have a garage, a basement, and we're looking to add ingress and egress windows to the basements simply for a safety sake. We had agreed we would not have bedrooms in the basement as part of our original use variance, and that condition stands. We are looking to change the amenity package for the project. We are now looking to build 3 tot lots, one of which will be located down near the affordable housing project, located down in the bottom of the job, in this area. And the other tot lots will be located adjacent to the clubhouse, along with some basketball courts that we're proposing, and a splash park, along with an increase in size to the clubhouse. We are removing amenities from the prior approval. Those would be a dog park, a pool, and pickleball courts that were previously approved. We're going to replace them with the tot lots, a splash park, and 2 basketball courts. The applicant believes that the pool itself is a costly thing for a homeowner association to be involved with, and that they're underutilized. They believe that the splash park is a better alternative. And they believe that the proposed amenities are more suitable for the community. There's really no reduction in the recreational opportunities. It's just, they're similar amenities, just different. We had agreed during our initial use variance as well as the final site plan approval that we would have the tot lots and the passive open space constructed before we received 25% of COs for the project. This was not in there because we did not previously have the basketball courts in, but we would agree to have those built before we have 50% of certificate of occupancies issued. And before 75% of the certificate of occupancies are issued, we'll have all of the amenities constructed, including the clubhouse. And we are looking to increase the size of the clubhouse from 2,278 square feet to 4,470 square feet. And we're looking to increase the height from 19 feet to 27 feet. The applicant believes that this will simply increase the recreation opportunity for the community, and that for the 200 families that are going to be living here, they believe that the prior facility was undersized.
By increasing it and raising the height, is there going to be a second floor?
No second floor. It's still going to be a 1-story structure. We're going to have architectural testimony. Dr. Hofstein can describe more about the structure itself.
Is there going to be more parking now that you're making the clubhouse larger?
We did not increase the clubhouse parking as part of this application. The clubhouse is solely for the residents of the facility, and it's made to be so that it's generally in walking distance from most of the units. It's expected that more residents will walk than drive to the clubhouse. So we didn't believe that we needed to add additional parking, but we're always willing to listen and discuss things with the board.
Is there a requirement of, from the size to how much parking there is?
There is not a requirement. We had agreed during our initial proposal, trying to get it right. Yeah, we did not include the clubhouse spaces in our calculation of our parking. So you'd have to give me a minute to give you the number that we had agreed to there.
Just had a quick question about the clubhouse while you're looking that up. Will that be available for events, renting by the, for the residents to have events and things like that?
Yes.
All right. Maybe we want to,
Just the residents, though.
so they can't have outside guests come for a party or something of that nature? I understand the concept. Now, what I'm driving at is, and I'm just using real-life experience of my own. I just went to a one-year-old's birthday party at a clubhouse in a unit, in a development similar to this. And the parking was woefully insufficient at the clubhouse. So it's just something to consider. If you're going to allow those types of events, we might want to consider that.
Bill's just trying to get the right number for you, so the record's clear.
Ms. Bradley,
Go ahead, Mr. Hudak.
you testified, Mr. Stevens, about the affordable housing units, and you used the word segregated from the rest of the community. What is the conventional wisdom today about separating the affordable housing units from all the others and the possible stigma that gets attached to that area?
That's right, we can answer. So what we're seeing from a planning perspective, Mr. Hudak, is that this is now the preferred way to build affordable housing.
Well, I know you testified that it is easier for the management company to manage them, so you testified that it's more cost-effective for you guys. I'm concerned about the residents of that area and, if it's the stigma that's attached to that.
So if I could just jump in, it's really more because this is a for-sale project. When we're doing rental projects, they're usually apartment buildings, and they're integrated, and nobody knows, the difference. But here we have a development that's going to be sold to individuals who are going to take out a mortgage. It's probably going to be the biggest investment that they have. And so we believe that from a marketing perspective, for the market rate units, it's better not to have the affordable units mixed in with them. We also have an issue because when you have the affordable units, it's very hard to find people who actually qualify for affordable housing. You have to remember, you can only make so much money, but you also have to qualify for a mortgage and make your mortgage payments. And so for the for sale project, we may have empty units for quite some time, and we don't want to leave the market rate units with empty units. It doesn't make any sense. And then you put that on with the fact that with the construction of the units themselves, when you have affordable, they're on the first floor, they have to be handicapped accessible. So it makes it very difficult when you look at the whole project and you have this market rate and people are, these are going to sell. The market rates are going to go quick. We don't want to have empty buildings with units here and there. We feel it would be better, and then we're going to partner with an affordable housing entity who does this all the time. Because there's also a lot of marketing that goes into this. You have to have very specific areas of the state that have to be given notice. Many nonprofit organizations have to be given notice. All of the applicants have to file with the Affordable Housing Liaison their application that has to be vetted. And then all the qualified people who qualify for the affordable housing, then get put in a lottery system. So it's a very onerous task to undertake. So it's just, we believe that it's better for the success of the project for us to pull out the affordable and have them over here, and the law allows it. You're not required to integrate the affordable units. And for a for-sale project, it's just very cumbersome. I do it all the time with my affordable housing clients when we're doing rental projects. It doesn't seem to have the same effect, because you're dealing more with apartments as opposed to this type of a product.
So again, all of your statements referred to the benefit of the developer. I am questioning, and maybe Mr. Peters can weigh in on this as well, how the residents of this area feel and what, what everyone else is doing out there and how everyone is feeling about this segregation.
Right, well, so I can't speak for somebody who's buying an affordable housing unit because I'm not that person. So I understand what you're saying, but when you look at affordable housing, you have to make it economically feasible for the market rate developer to build the affordable housing. And they're telling us that in order for their project to be successful, they need to have the affordable units put into separate buildings. I believe they're going to be beautiful buildings, they're going to be part of a beautiful community. The buildings outside are going to be very nice, but yes, people will know that those are probably where the affordable units are, but it's going to be a brand-new construction. It's going to be terrific, even the affordable units.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just to follow up on that, because I might not have been following along all of Mr. Stevens' testimony. Either Ms. Jennings or Mr. Stevens, is there a phasing plan proposed currently in this set of plans for the affordable housing unit construction?
Yeah, so we have to, by law, and that would be your affordable housing liaison. It's very clear that as you're constructing the market rate units, I believe the first 25% of your units can go up, and then before you go to the 26th unit, let's say you have a 100-unit project, you have to build 25 of the affordable. And you have to think about the affordable are in only 3 buildings. So we're going to build the affordable probably much quicker than we're going to build the market rate. So there's a set forth in the Uniform Housing Affordability Control Act that is very clear as to how you have to do it. So we will give you a plan so you guys can follow along as the COs are issued in your building department. But that's all statutory. That we have to do, and we can't get around that.
My question was, is it in this set of plans?
It is not, Mr.
Okay,
Peters.
the reason I was asking is because I think Mr. Hudak's trying to figure out, are you going to build 154 units, and then before you build the 155th unit, build 40 affordables? I think he's looking for the project to be integrated. Ms. Jennings gave the correct UHAC standards that when they get to 25% of the market rate units, they have to build the first affordable unit. They're not going to build one unit, you're going to build a building. So when they get to 25%, which I guess would be somewhere around 50 units, then they have to build one of the buildings. So they will be integrated. It won't be, they'll build all the townhomes, dump the project, have someone else come back here and say, well, we want to put more market rate units up. That would violate the theory of the use variance was granted for this project. So there is a phasing plan for the affordable housing units so that they're integrated into the project.
Mr. Peters, I think you're misinterpreting my point, and that was that I am concerned about when the bus comes to pick up the kids to go to school. I'm sure it's going to stop there. So these kids coming in out of that segregated, low-income housing, they're going to, I don't know, are they going to be ostracized? Are they going to be picked on because they live in the low income? You know, it's not spread out throughout the whole project. It's limited to one area.
So maybe I can try to address this a little bit. The co-regulations with regard to that type of concern are pretty stringent. One of the things that I took notice of, and again, I'm sitting here and looking at the plans and I'm wondering, you know, one of the requirements is that these types of units are not built in a place or a less desirable location than market rate, right? That is a requirement. I don't necessarily see it as less desirable, but you may disagree with me. I think that this is not the first plan where I've seen these types of units in their own, I don't want to call it a section, but in their own sort of, you know, buildings, right, sort of together. And there's nothing in the law that prohibits that. I will say that the statute, as well as our ordinances, you know, say that they prefer that these units be integrated, but there's no legal requirement that they be integrated. So if I don't know if that maybe helps to answer the question a little bit better.
Well, I agree.
Right.
I believe that they should be integrated. segregation. And, you know, I hear that, and
It was an unfortunate word,
it happens
yes.
on the back of my neck stand up.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
Mr. Hudak, I think I can, so, this is not a new way, this is not a new design method or planning method. Builders have been clustering the COA units in a certain section of a development, but it's still part of the community that's being built, all right? Large tract builders, they do that for active adult communities where they have affordable units in one area of the active adult community, and then they have their market rate somewhere else. We have those such type units right here in Jackson as part of the Westlake. As far as some of the other types of multifamily plan applications we've seen and approved, we've seen it both ways. We've seen some that have been commingled throughout the market rate buildings, but I would say we've seen more so where they've been clustered in that development, but they've been clustered together somewhere. So it's not uncommon. It's not uncommon, and I can tell you, but when my recollection when this application came in front of us, I don't recall that being a large. All right, never mind. Ernie reminded me of my non-recollection.
Now, I don't know if what I'm saying,
No,
the
no,
questions that I'm asking are, yeah, I think it is good that we discuss this.
No.
So that's.
No, it's a good point, Mr. Hudak, and I think another way to look at it is if a project this size, it's not uncommon for a developer to offer two types of units. I mean, that's done all the time. And there isn't going to be a sign at the end of this cul-de-sac that says affordable housing. You know, the township's going to know about it. It's going to be on your rolls and take up some of your responsibility. However, it's not going to be broadcast in the neighborhood. It's just going to be just a different unit type. I'm sure in the neighborhood you grew up in, you know, you lived in a house, and some of your friends had bigger houses, some had smaller houses. I know I don't look at people differently because of that.
I
Madam Chair?
was on the board when this was originally heard. I'm sorry, can you hear me? I was on the board when this was originally heard, and I haven't heard, in my 4.5 years now, I haven't heard too many of the multifamily developments like this, but this one specifically I remember, and it's funny because I didn't realize until tonight when he pointed out the name changed, so I didn't realize that I heard this original variance. So when I was reading through it, so originally it was called Hyson blah, 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 that's not.
Oh, the applicant's name changed, yes.
Right. So I was a little thrown off, I'm like, I wasn't part of this, Ryan, anyway. That was one of the things that stuck out to us then, and I can remember questioning the board members then, what is the standard? And although it is done both ways, one of the things that stuck out was we liked that it was integrated. There was some discussion about garages, were they gonna be the same? Because although they're obviously gonna be different than the market rate units, were they gonna be similar so they didn't stick out? So, I'm struggling a little bit, like Mr. Hudak, obviously, with, I understand from a business perspective, right? I put my business hat on, I understand exactly why you're making the request, but I think back to the original hearing, and part of what was liked was that they were integrated in part of it. I don't want to use the word segregated either.
Cluster.
He said cluster, Mr. Hill.
Clustered.
Clustered.
In a different area, but I do remember that being part of the discussion. So I can understand completely why you want to discuss it, because I'm struggling with it myself. My other question, before I open the floor to Ms. Parnas, is back to the parking. That also, if I remember, was a question at that time. And when I went back to the resolution, it talked about the number of spaces, but if we're going to be renting it out for use, I would think, piggybacking on what Mr. Murphy said, I would think that we really need to discuss some additional parking there. One of the other developments that was brought up at that time, they talked about the problem they have with parking and how they're parking outside the neighborhood. So if we're having a large event, we're making it bigger, we're raising they're talking about raising the roof, I think we really need to address that as well, because otherwise we're gonna end up with some of the other developments like we have in town that have run into this problem. So I think that's definitely something we would need to address as well.
Thank you. So my question when hearing all this is, what are the standards? That's always what I hold on to is and Mr. Murphy, you mentioned something vaguely about maybe our ordinances prefer it but don't require it. Is there any, because I just think it's a dangerous path to go down to start saying, well, I'm concerned about, this person and bringing subjective, I could appreciate wanting to, protect X or, talk about my preference about Y, but I just always like to go back to but what's the benchmark that we need? What do we need to be measuring this against? What are the criteria? Because I just think that's what I always go back to.
I mean, I wish there was a set criteria, and let me just, I'll read the portion of the ordinance that I'm relying upon to kind of tell you that there's discretion, right? I mean, there is discretion. It's not as if it's a set standard. And what the section 244.25 says is that to the extent possible, low and moderate income units shall be integrated with the market units. So like any good lawyer, I could read that 16 different ways.
I was just going to say,
right?
you could argue that it's integrated, and you could argue that it isn't.
Correct. But what that leads me to conclude, right, from the way that it's worded, is that there is no requirement that they be integrated. It's preferred, right? It's preferred. The statute mimics what the ordinance says. So again, there is no requirement that they be clustered, and there's no requirement that they be integrated. Again, I tend to agree to a certain extent with Mr. Stevens and Mr. Peters and Mr. Hill. And when I say that, I personally have seen them, I am more used to seeing them clustered, personally.
Right. Same.
So again, to me, it's not an uncommon request, nor is it anything that overly concerns me. My concern was more related to the use variance, and whether or not that was considered by the board in the grant of the use variance. That's where my head was, because I wanted to make sure that we didn't need a new use variance. My ultimate conclusion on that, as I told you, was that I don't believe that that was considered by the board as a condition for the use variance. I do believe it was testified to, but the resolution's pretty clear that the only condition that was placed upon the applicant was the 20% set aside for the COA as offered by the applicant. It wasn't even required.
Madam
so-
Chair, if I might offer a real-world experience. On balance, I think that this plan would be a superior plan when it's finished and you're standing out there. And the reason for that is because they're going to be built 8-unit buildings. You're getting rid of 10-unit buildings, and they're going to be 8-unit buildings. So there's not going to be any 10-unit buildings. So when you think of multifamily projects, I lived in a place called Wyndham Place behind Freehold Regional Central State Hospital. What an end unit. I didn't realize until I lived there for probably 2 or 3 weeks that mine was an affordable building because it was 10 units, and in the middle there was 2 stacked units. For the life of me, I couldn't tell, but I did notice when I drove around that I lived in one of them bigger buildings, and I didn't enjoy the architecture of it as much. So to the extent, and again, one person says potato and one person says potato. On balance, how it looks, there's going to be similar architecture to the area where the affordable units are going to be. And instead of having larger townhome buildings, we're going to have less large, smaller townhome buildings. So if you think about it from that perspective, I think on balance, what the site looks like when you walk through it, you drive through it, you see the school buses circulate around it. Yes, they need to be here for an amended approval. They need to go through all the details with us. I'm very happy to see the board members have looked at the plans and understood the difference between what was approved previously and what they're proposing now, which, you know, when you look at Bill's two sheets, I think on balance, you should also take into account that they're not building larger buildings. In the end, they're going to build one fewer building, and all the buildings, in theory, would be smaller than they were previously because they're going to cluster the affordable units in their own buildings. And again, we may get more information either from Mr. Stevens, a planner, an architect, but from my perspective, as you look at this project when it's finished, I think it's probably less intense than the project that was originally approved.
Just to piggyback off that, I completely concur with what Mr. Peters said, but just piggyback off that, I think the applicant here deserves some credit because the entire reduction is to the market rate units. The requirement in the use variance was 20%, right? So because the applicant has actually reduced the number of market units, but kept the affordable housing units the same, giving the township 40. They've actually given us more than was conditioned in the use variance. So I mean, again, I think that deserves some consideration here because again, as Ms. Jennings said, we have an enormous color requirement now. So just some food for thought. It doesn't take away from the idea of segregation, but the way that I look at this particular plan personally is that from a planning perspective, the way that I see it, and Mr. Peters, feel free to disagree, I'm not a planner, it makes the best use of the property. It appears to me to be the best use of the property, and it appears to me to be appropriately designed so that perhaps it won't look as though those are affordable housing units, but perhaps it might look like they're rental units or something of that nature. So again, I don't think the location is less desirable. And again, I prefer the word clustered, like everybody else here. But ultimately, clubhouse parking aside, I think the applicant deserves some credit here. I see it as a well-designed plan.
Through the chair.
And just if we could just address the parking for a second. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to make just a couple of comments. One, I think we corrected something by using cluster instead of segregated. And that's a better word. And I wish they would come up with something better than affordable housing, because in a lot of people's minds, they equate that with welfare and low income. And if anybody ever heard, we once had a planner down about affordable housing, and these are people who have to earn significant money to be able to either purchase or live in these homes. At one time, they were talking about $82,000. I don't know if that's close to a number. Yes, I was on the board in March of 2020, and I was surprised that you had integrated units. I mean, everything we've seen going up in Jackson now has these clustered homes. It's just, as we said, it's just a management way, and these units have to be managed, and if you have them dispersed between other buildings, how does a management company manage? I mean, they have to be within reason. So I don't see anything wrong with what's going on. And just one quick mention on parking. I think the chairman was discussing about the parking situation. I think it's called Cook's Landing, right across. Okay. I mean, if anybody drives in there, you cannot drive through there. There were cars parked all over the street. The town had to stop them from parking outside the community recently. And I just hope that there's enough room for two cars to go on the street, and maybe street parking has to be eliminated in those cases. And again, look for more parking areas.
Yeah, so we would actually like to address the parking because the site is actually significantly overparked. And with respect to the clubhouse itself, there are 60 spaces that we didn't even count in our parking calculation that are right next to the clubhouse. And if you think about the clubhouse, it's less than 5,000 square feet. I just want to make the math easy. If it was 1 per 100, if you had an ordinance requirement, that's only 40 spaces. We got 60. It's going to be more than sufficient spaces if somebody has a little party there or something like a first birthday party for their friends and family to come over instead of having it in their home. Plus, Bill can go through it, but the testimony is that each unit has been assigned 2 spaces, whether they have the garage, 2-car garage, or a garage and a driveway, or even the affordable units have one, I believe, near them, and they'll all be assigned spaces. But Bill probably should testify rather than me.
The only reason I thought I read, and again, I was not on the board's counsel at the time. When I was going through this, I thought I read that there were 44 spaces, and there was testimony that it was not increased. So, but it was increased.
The site plan that was approved is the same parking area that we have now. It's
Okay.
60 spaces, but
Maybe
we never
I could have read it wrong.
But we never counted those, Mr. Murphy, in our calculations.
Understood.
Ms. Parnes said she wanted to hear what are the facts, what do we compare it against? We are required with this project, everything included, to have 566 parking spaces. We have 695 spaces provided, plus the 60 spaces in the clubhouse. So we are substantially overparked, and I know we went over the Cook's Landing debate at length when we talked about this. That was not one of my projects, but they're very narrow roads. I think some of them are as narrow as 20 feet, if I remember correctly, very narrow and very underparked. We addressed all of those things we went through there. That is not this project. This project will, in my opinion, end up being the nicest multifamily project in Jackson Township.
And I mean, respectfully, I will tell you, looking at it from the aerial site plan view, to me, much better design than the place that I was at for the clubhouse parking. So I have significant less concern, so, thank you.
Madam
you.
Chair, just to finish up on the off-street parking, Mr. Stevens, on Tranquility Place, that aisle width is,
30 feet.
the entire project is a fire zone, correct? There's no parking permitted any place in this project
Correct.
on the street.
We do not have on-street parking here. That is correct.
So that's one of the problems that we had diagonally across the street down the road. This design also, because it's not condos or apartments, there's also limited space along the street because of the number of driveways for the 195 units that are being proposed. So yes, could someone decide to go and park on that 30-foot strip, 1 or 2 people in between a number of the buildings? Maybe. Please understand that the entire loop road is posted, no parking, fire lane. There'll be signage to that effect. So, as opposed to, and I remember Dr. Hofstein having this conversation either at the use or site plan, well, if we make it 30, people will park on it, so should we have it at 24? No, we need to have it at 30. So they built something that's sufficient in width to handle the traffic, and they provided, quite frankly, 750 parking spaces for what amounts to just under 200 units. So yes, at 3 bedrooms, there might be a few more cars if you did the calculation. But in the end, for the project, there's 750 or 55 parking spaces for right around 200 units.
Along the parking line, typically HOAs do not allow commercial vehicles to be parked in that area. Do you guys have a designated area for residents that do have commercial vehicles to park? Or where would, let's say, a plumber who has a van, where would you park?
So we don't have any quote-unquote commercial vehicle parking areas on site. If a man is a plumber and he brings his plumbing van.
Sorry, you beat me to it. You beat me to it.
Thank you. If a person is a plumber and they bring their van home, they park in one of their parking spaces.
So the HOA will not have any restrictions of commercial vehicles?
Yeah, we'll just say, no, and I mean, I don't know what the township's rules are. I mean, people are probably parking in residential zones on their driveways right now and in the streets. I don't know if they get cited for that. I don't know if that's an issue. It's not really a land use issue.
I know what Mr. Hudak is driving at. I live in a development similar to this, and we have a designated area for commercial vehicles. And they're not permitted in the regular spaces, or whatever you want to call them. I don't know that that's as common anymore. And given the nature of the fact that these have driveways, I feel
Yeah, they're
less
all-
concerned.
It's all owner occupied in the entire development, so these are gonna be people's driveways and their own parking spaces. There's a few guest spots, but you're certainly not gonna park in somebody else's parking spot.
I
It's
mean,
gonna
these
be-
townhome communities do have those rules, but I mean, if there's a representation that the HOA is not going to prohibit that, I would feel pretty good about that.
It's up to the HOA.
Yeah.
They make the rules. Right. And I've seen many communities, all in Jackson, that don't allow these vehicles, and these guys are forced to park on public roads. And in a situation like this, there are no public roads for them to park.
Correct.
Madam Chair? I'm like used to seeing neighborhoods where people have a cargo van in their driveway. I'm just trying to understand, like, they're not permitted to park their pickup truck or their cargo van in their driveway?
They are not.
It's commercially registered.
Development, commercial vehicles is not allowed to park, especially if there's an HOA. Commercial vehicles.
Correct, I think that's Title 39.
I agree with Ms. Jennings. I can't speak to the township. I'm speaking from an HOA perspective. They're not allowed to park.
If you go to the gas station over by ShopRite, what is that, Cooksbridge?
Well, yes.
If you go there after hours, you'll see Cooksbridge Road is lined with
Really?
commercial vehicles because they're not allowed to park in that area.
Landscapers, plumbers. That was one of the cases, that was the development that we talked a lot about then. But with
I
the
think to your
excess
point, though,
parking-
that's something that the association agreed on, like, all the residents agreed, okay, we don't want people parking their plumbing.
Well, I can't speak to whether the residents agreed, that was what the HOA agreed, and I think that's
HOA.
what Mr. Hudak is trying to avoid,
Right.
having that situation.
Okay.
I think,
I-
well,
I think Mr. Peters was going to give us some very valuable input on that. Did you have something you want to say? Title 39, something of that nature?
I think there's two things. One is the imposition of Title 39, which the applicant can concede to, which allows the town to come in and write and enforce parking laws. And then if the HOA has something that says you can't park a commercial vehicle or a certain size vehicle on site, you have some enforcement power.
so where does that leave somebody?
Yeah, I think the intent's not to do that. I mean, it's gonna be look, if a plumber buys one of the townhouses and he wants to park his van on his driveway or in his garage, why do we care?
I think we're kind of going down a little bit of a rabbit hole. Nobody has indicated that a resident's commercial vehicle that they use for their plumbing business cannot park in their driveway or in a parking spot here. Nobody's suggested that. I think that it came up as a hypothetical, but there's been no testimony on the record that the HOA restricts that, right? So I think we're going down an avenue here.
And I respect what you're saying, but I understand what Mr. Hudak's saying. Because like I said, I was on this originally, and that was one of the developments that was brought up. And
Yeah.
that was one of the problems that was cited. So my suggestion here is, and, because I completely understand where he's going, where does that leave somebody? Cook's Bridge, despite the fact that they shouldn't be parking there, at least they have an option of somewhere to park. This location, you're really not gonna have that. But that being said, with the over-parking situation, you do still have clubhouse parking. There are some other places they could go within the development if it's not an HOA regulation. So there is an out there. But I appreciate Mr. Hudak bringing that up, because that is a huge issue over there. That development is a parking nightmare.
Yeah, and again, I think it's a valid concern because we don't want, there's really nowhere to park on Harmony Road, those types of vehicles. So, yeah, I see where you're going with that. Okay.
I have a question just for the record. Mr. Stevens, you mentioned that you're not making changes to the size of the clubhouse parking lot? Because it looks on the plan like there is a change.
No, we had 60 parking stalls before, we have the same number of stalls now.
I'm looking at Exhibit A4.
Am I
and it
wrong?
Looks to me like it's missing the row of parking that's closest to the clubhouse. And there's more, I mean, it's a good thing there's more now, but it looks different. It looks like there's an additional, it looks like it was 46 and it's now 60.
Yeah, I think you're shorting yourself. That's why I said it looked like 44 before. I think you actually did increase it.
I think we did, Mr. Murphy. I apologize for misspeaking. You are correct, Ms. Barnes. Exhibit A4, Anthony, if we could look at that. So Exhibit A4, I prepared just to try to make it simple for the board to understand what we were talking about. Those are the two areas of the project that are being proposed as part of this revision. And it's a good thing also now because we can look at what was previously approved and what is being proposed. So yes, we did end up adding another row of parking along the front of the clubhouse. So we did increase that number of stalls in that parking lot slightly. You are correct. Thank you for correcting me.
And another question, I don't know if, I don't want to interrupt your flow, but since we're all going off on tangents, and I'm looking at this lot, this exhibit, it looks like you highlighted the areas that have the revisions, but I'm trying to understand, because I think the 10-unit buildings were reduced to 8-unit buildings, but all I see is the common spaces and the new affordable area, so I'm just, I'm curious, I'm just trying to make sense of like, where are the other changes?
No problem, and certainly understood. I was trying to give you the planning testimony, and yes, there have been some architectural changes to the buildings. We are going to have architectural testimony.
Okay.
Our architect will go through that in detail with you, but yes, we did change the 10-unit buildings down to 8-unit buildings, as has been discussed in my testimony and Mr. Peters' testimony, and that is the intention.
It's just
yes.
not indicated on this plan as the revised
You're right, I
areas.
could have circled the middle of those 10 buildings, but I did not.
Okay.
Yeah, can I ask a
Yes.
few questions? Some very just specific, make sure I understand the map, and then the final one. So the affordable housing, just to be sure, it's buildings, because you nicely numbered the buildings, so it's 4, 5, 6?
That is correct, yes.
Those are the affordable ones, okay. So the outside, architecturally, they're going to be exactly or similar to the others?
They're not going to be exactly the same, they are going to be similar, and again, we're going to have another witness, and we have an architect here with us this evening who's going to give that testimony.
Okay. So in theory, I know nothing about what's going on, and I just drive through it. I'll be able to tell that those affordable ones are a little different than all the others.
Right, I think my testimony earlier saying that we're going to have 2 unit types in this project is correct, and it's not unusual for a job.
Right, so 2 unit types, affordable, non-affordable.
Correct.
Am I right?
Well, if you want to use those words.
Yeah, you wouldn't say non-affordable, but market.
Market
I
rate,
get you, I
yes.
get you. Okay, I understand that. The clubhouse, right? So you'd mentioned it was about 19 feet, almost 20 feet that you got approved for, and now you want to make it 27.
Correct,
But it's still just 1 floor.
yes.
Okay, so who's going to be so tall that you need 27 feet?
I'm going to have
Why make it so tall?
I'm going to have the architect give that testimony. I just
Okay.
want to give the planning.
I'll wait for that. I know it's
Yeah.
next to a basketball court, but I don't think we have a 27
I just
foot.
think it looks nice, like this building, we're 1 floor, and look how high our building ceiling is.
It does.
It gives a lot of ambiance to a structure, it does. And
Okay.
the planning testimony here, I think this really is a de minimis variance that we're asking for. We're approved for 20 feet, we're asking for 27 feet. The clubhouse itself is surrounded by buildings that are 35 feet tall, and again, permitted. it's because it's an accessory structure, it's only allowed to be 15 feet high. So that's why we're asking for this.
Okay.
But when one looks at it from the street, it's 600 feet off of Harmony Road. I mean, you're not going to see it from the street. The only people that are really going to see it are the people in the community themselves, and it's going to be a benefit to the community. So I think it's something they're going to appreciate, the aesthetic
Thank-
quality that we're going to see. But again, the architect will give more
Right,
testimony.
okay, yeah, but thank you, that's a good, so it's not gonna be taller than all the other buildings, because the other ones are actually taller. It's
The
not
other
gonna
buildings are
stand out
tall,
because it's so
correct.
tall.
And just to
Okay,
clarify,
that's helpful, thank you.
just to clarify, you're looking for a C variance, not a D6 variance, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
We're looking
So
for a
you don't exceed by more than 10 feet or 10, what is, 10
An
feet?
accessory structure, that only applies to a
Right.
principal
Yeah,
structure.
well, you're right, but
That's correct.
you don't need a D6 variance, just a C variance.
Mr. Hyman?
However, we should all just, it's as it relates to the LC zone, correct?
That is correct. That's an LC zone requirement, accessory structures of 15 feet.
Thank you.
Because we didn't rezone the property. They got a
Correct.
Use variance for this use with a set of
With a
standards
C
as a
variance for the
guide.
height. Yep, correct.
But the height of the clubhouse was dictated and given in great testimony going through the original approval, so we do need to amend that. That's what we're seeking, to make it slightly taller.
Okay, thank you, I appreciate that, yeah. What was my, so the square footage of the clubhouse is almost double, right? So the occupancy, is there a limit to how many people can be in that clubhouse at one time? Fire and all that kind of stuff?
Again, that's architectural testimony. It's not something I'm familiar with.
I'll ask him about that. It also related to the parking. Looks fine to me. You got 60 spots that are open to anybody, not reserved for anybody. So if I have a party, yeah, it looks good. Just give me one more second. I had a few, I was writing them down as people were talking, so I just want to make sure I capture all of them. No, I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Hyman?
A couple questions. First of all, did I miss this clubhouse? Is that going to be able to be rented out to people outside, or is it only specifically for people part of this HOA?
Only the residents of the HOA.
Perfect. Next question, is there going to be EV parking outside? I'm assuming that it wasn't a requirement then, it probably is now.
It was not a requirement then, and we have decided that we are going to comply with the EV parking mandate and make the project compliant. So we agree to comply.
Perfect, thank you.
Sorry, just reminded me of the other question. So in the clubhouse, it's only for the residents, right? But me as a resident, I could bring 50 of my friends, no problem, right?
Yes.
Okay. So I want to make sure that that's clear. Yes, it's only for the residents, but I can bring 50 outsiders, and that's why I need the parking.
You can make your birthday party, that's fine.
Yeah, we want to watch
As
a
long as
football
not
game
being
or
rented
something,
out.
you know?
Essentially, it won't be rented.
Perfect.
No commercial rental. Correct. Thank you.
Thank you.
One of the points that Mr. Peters brought out, talking about variances for the project in his review letter, Anthony, if we could go back to Exhibit A3, please. Talks about the area located immediately adjacent to the wetlands. We're talking about building number 6, this building. Pointer trouble today. So one thing that we had never realized and was never shown on our prior plan was that the township has an ordinance that buildings have to be a minimum of 50 feet from wetlands lines. So our prior application was, by pure happenstance, it was 54 feet to the building that was located along that cul-de-sac. This building is 49.11 feet to the wetlands line, and Mr. Peters pointed that out to us. So we're just going to agree to comply. We're going to move the building so that it's 50 feet. We'll find the 10 inches that we need to find, and we'll move the building so that it is 50 feet. We will comply with that requirement. Mr. Peters also asked about building coverage and maximum lot coverage. We do comply with both of those. There is basically no change or very small change to the building coverage, 0.2%, and to the lot coverage, less than 0.5%. So they're both very small changes and still falling within the requirements. I think we talked about the parking at length already. One of the things we really didn't talk about, though, and should, is the parking for the COA units. Each COA unit is going to have a driveway in front of the unit itself, so you have one driveway parking spot for your unit. And then Mr. Peters just said that, listen, you know, these units, they should have 2 designated spots, so we will designate spots in the parking fields themselves so that every unit owner will have 2 designated spots, one in front of their unit and then one in the parking field. We talked about ADA compliance, and to me, that is one of the biggest benefits as the engineer who has to design these grades and make these walks work. It is not an easy task, but having them all in a building next to each other makes it much easier than having them in different buildings with different varying heights. So we are going to comply with the ADA, and I think this building will be an improvement in our ADA compliance. Somebody had asked about the EV. Mr. Hyman, I think, asked about the EV parking. We're going to agree to comply. As I said in my opening testimony, the stormwater management system is largely constructed for this site, and we have no questions that the changes can be handled by the existing stormwater management system, and we're happy to work through those details with your engineer if he has any further questions. We did submit, just because it is a application requirement, we did submit the original environmental impact statement that we had prepared for this original project along with this application, just to get through a checklist requirement. But as the board can see, the site is already cleared, mostly developed. We are not changing the limited disturbance as part of this project, so there really is no environmental impact to this revision. The landscaping that we had proposed for this project, the board may recall, we have substantial landscaping plans, increasing buffers, because a lot of this was farm field. Originally, there wasn't a lot of landscaping, so we are doing some extensive plantings. We had not made really any changes, save to accommodate the changes and improvements that we have, the interior of the recreation area and the COA clustering area. But other than that, we kept the landscaping plan exactly the same as it was. Mr. Peters does have some comments, and the applicant agreed to comply, so we are going to comply with his comments. Lighting for the site is going to remain exactly the same, with the exception of making some small changes to Serenity Court. So we need to light that parking area. One of the things that was discussed at great length when we talked about lighting for this project was whether or not we were going to light the walking trails around the perimeter of the project. And we all agreed that that was not a good idea, and the applicant agreed at that time that what we would do is place bollard lighting at all places where the walking trail meets the paved roadways, so that people would have a clear definition of where the walkway starts and where the road starts. And we are going to continue doing that. Garbage refuse collection, we had talked about this at great length, and there are no changes. It will be done by the homeowner association. The town has no obligation here. It will be done utilizing robocans. Those robocans will be stored inside of each of the units, and the architect will testify further as to how that is done, but there really is no change to what we had previously proposed. And the same thing is being proposed for the clubhouse. We're going to use robocans for that as well. And while we don't show it, we will add in a screened-in fencing area to store the robocans for the clubhouse, but we're proposing to utilize the same method as we're using for the rest of the development. As far as utilities go for the project, we do have municipal water and municipal sewer here. The sewer comes from the south out to County Line Road. That sewer is already constructed. The sewer is on site, and it is already built. The water is coming from 2 directions. It's coming from the north on Harmony Road to the south to the project, as well as being connected through that same route, through that same project to the south, out to County Line Road. The water has been extended from the site in Harmony Road, is in the project, has been extended down to the connection point where it joins the project to the south of us. They have not yet constructed that water, but we understand it will be done shortly, and we will complete the loop for the water. JTMUA has asked us to go back and update our approvals from OCUA and DEP for this amendment. Should this board look favorably, we have to go back to the DEP and to OCUA to update our utility approvals to reflect these changes.
Through the chair?
Yes.
Just to follow up on the EV, what I was referring to before was by the clubhouse, is on Serenity Court, where you mentioned that the low-income housing is having only one parking driveway and then one designated on the street. So I just want to make sure if they have two EV vehicles, that they're going to be able to charge it on Serenity, that you're going to have EV stations in their parking lot as well, because if they have two vehicles, then they can't charge them because they only have one driveway.
That is something that people would have to end up working out. I mean, we're required to provide up to 15% make-ready spaces. That's what the EV requirements are. We're not going to build two EV parking spaces for every unit. That's not something we're going to do.
Right, no, I don't mean that. I mean is that,
Oh, will the
In-
affordables have
will-
access?
yes,
Yes,
correct.
they will, yes.
you're saying you're going to put EVs in, by the affordable and by the clubhouse.
That is correct,
That was
yes.
my concern.
We're going to
Now, they don't have
comply.
to be designated, but I just want to make sure that they have access to it near their home.
Right, we will comply with the rules, and yes, we will provide some EV parking down in Serenity Court as well.
Thank you for the clarification.
Moving on, talking about the environmental constraints for the site, the board will recall, we had gone through and gotten all our DEP permits, flood hazard area, and wetlands permits prior to this. Your engineer brings up the point that our letter of interpretation, wetlands letter of interpretation has expired, which it has. We do still have the valid wetlands transition area averaging, and all our wetlands permits are still valid. However, all the work's already been done. We're not doing any more work in that direction. It's already been finished. I don't believe there is a need to update the existing LOI, but again.
Bill, I would agree with you. The fact that the project's under construction, there's no need. Yep.
And we do have valid wetlands permits. Happy to supply them if anybody needs to see copies. We are not proposing any changes to any of the buffers that were previously done. We're not proposing any changes to the dimensions of the driveways. All the buildings previously were located 26 feet from the curb line. That dimension will continue to stay the same. We are not changing any of the dimensions from the buildings to the parking areas, side yard setbacks, that type of things. We had agreed originally that would be 15 feet as a minimum, and that is what we're providing. There is a condominium association that's already been created for this project. It's created and the master deed has been filed. All of the deed restrictions for the open space, wetlands, flood hazard area, all of those have already been filed and recorded. As Mr. Peters did say, we do have no parking signage striping on the plan, and we're proposing no change to that. That is going to stay. The architect will give more testimony regarding the architectural improvements. The improvements along along Harmony Road have been begun. We have, as I said, our utilities in, we have our stormwater in. We have the curb in. What we don't have is our poles relocated. I don't know if anybody's heard any of this, but it's hard to get poles moved these days. So we're waiting for JCP&L to move their poles. As soon as they move their poles, we will get the site, the frontage paved there as well. But that is what we're waiting for. The county improvements are started, just not completed, waiting for the utility company. I think that's generally what I had in my testimony.
Thank you. That's the direct testimony.
Any additional questions, Mr. Stevens?
I have a quick question. So it looks like the original plan had a dog park, and that was removed. I know 195 units with pets. Can you tell us why that was removed?
The applicant believes that the amenity package they're proposing is the appropriate one. This is their value. This is what they think that people want.
Any other questions, Mr. Stevens? You can call your next witness.
At this time, I'd like to call up our architect, Malky Rubb.
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Melissa Rubb. I
If you would
am,
ju-
sure,
Just raise your hand.
sure.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear affirm that the testimony, information, questions, or comments you're about to present before the board be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Please state your name, your affiliation, and your credentials.
will do. Melissa Rubb, last name R-U-B. I am a project manager at BF Design and Associates in Lakewood, New Jersey. I'm a graduate of the City College School of Architecture. I'm licensed here in the state of New Jersey. And I've previously testified before Jackson's Planning Board and many other municipal boards throughout the state.
This board accepts your credentials. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And if you could, just go through the different building designs, and if you're going to rely on any exhibits, just identify them for the record.
Sure, will do. Tonight, I'll be presenting our architectural proposal for Grand Harmony, outlining a few key items. To give the board a roadmap of our discussion, I'll begin with the requested minor modifications to the previously approved market rate townhomes. I'll be referring to the standard townhome as the Berkeley model. Then I'll briefly introduce two alternate layouts for the market rate townhomes called the Frisco and Aspen models. Next, I'll present a new single-car garage model, which we'll call the Crestmont, which will be in lieu of the previously designed areas at the COA units. We'll then review the floor plans for the new COA buildings, and lastly, we'll end with the clubhouse design. Anthony, if I can trouble you to pull up Exhibit A5. Thank you. A5 is a standard building elevation for the market rate units. This elevation was previously approved by the board. So my focus tonight will be on the requested modifications to these units. For the record, the Berkeley townhomes are approximately 1,103 square feet at the first floor, 1,288 square feet at the second floor, with the dimensions of 26 feet wide and 62 feet deep. Each townhome is 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, with an option to add an additional up to 2.5 baths. Mr. Peters' review letter raised the question of building height. These townhomes reach approximately 30 feet to the midline of the highest gable, varying slightly because of grading, but always under the 35-foot limit. If we can move to Exhibit A8, please, which is the attic plan. So we have added an attic and a basement plan to our submission. The attic, yeah, that's the first floor, second floor, thank you, attic. The attic includes an optional bonus room, a playroom, and bathrooms for, as options for potential buyers. And Exhibit A9. The basement features an open area and an optional room labeled Area B with an optional powder room. We are furthermore requesting the board remove the restriction for an egress window at the basement. The egress window is being requested purely from a safety standpoint. We feel that if there's a playroom or a home office in the basement, it would be prudent to provide a second means of egress from the story. We'll now proceed to Exhibits A11 and A12, which are the alternate layouts for the market rate homes. I want to stress that from the outside, these buildings will be identical to the Berkeley model. You won't be able to tell the difference, so it's only interior layout changes that we are presenting tonight. Exhibit A11, thank you, is the Frisco model. This model, again, has minor changes at the ground floor with an optional study in the breakfast area. And the loft area at the second floor has been removed to expand the owner's suite. If we move to Exhibit A12, this is the Aspen model. Similar to the Berkeley in layout, the Aspen is slightly shallower, so that's the difference here, at 58 feet due to site constraints. So this is, sometimes the site wouldn't allow for the full 62-foot model, so an end unit might be clipped to 58 feet, and this is our Aspen model. We'll now move on to Exhibit A13. So in lieu of the COA units, as Ms. Parnas astutely pointed out, the building footprint has not changed. And the reason for that is that where the stacked two-unit COA units were in the center of the building, we have replaced with a 24-foot wide townhome. So this is, again, a 3-bedroom unit with a single-car garage. And that's why the buildings have become lower in density from an 8-unit to a 10, from a 10-unit to an 8-unit, because they're no longer stacked units, they're a full townhome. Now, this model appears in buildings 1, 2, 3, 7, 11, 12, 17, 19, and 22. So these are the buildings that will be affected. This is a typical Crestmont unit. It's a 3-bedroom design with a single-car garage, which is 12 feet wide. We also have included an alcove in the garage area for 2 robocans. So to address item B7 on page 9 of Mr. Peters' letter, we believe that there is sufficient space for both a parked vehicle and the robocans. If we move on to Exhibit A14, so this is a full building elevation with the Crestmont unit integrated in. So you can see that it blends, nicely into the other units, and aesthetically, it's all cohesive. Now, Exhibits A15 through 24 are the previously approved architectural drawings. I've admitted them as exhibits just to have in my back pocket if we wanted to reference them for any reason, but we're going to move on to Exhibit A25. Thank you very much. So as you know, the discussion during Mr. Stevens' testimony, he has organized these 3 buildings around in a court-like fashion, buildings 4, 5, and 6. The layout of these COA units are identical to the ones that were approved previously. We have not changed any items in the layout of the building. We have just grouped them together and organized them differently. So again, and not to rehash the point, but there are some architectural considerations to grouping these buildings as well. Again, the COA units are slab-on-grade buildings, while the market rate units do have basements, and constructing these 2 buildings side by side does have logistical implications for our client. The second reason is that, as Mr. Stevens mentioned, the ground floor is an adaptable unit, and so complying with all the ADA codes at the threshold, changing from the market rate units to the COAs in the center, again, would be challenging to construct. Lastly, from a fire rating standpoint, the COA units have 8-foot ceilings on both floors, while the market rate units have 9-foot ceilings at the first floor. Grouping them would simplify the fire rating requirements for dwelling unit separation. Now, Exhibit A25 is a typical elevation of the COA unit building. So architecturally, it's speaking the same language, as the rest of the development. It really does mirror the aesthetic and the colors, the material palette is really all there. And sorry. Exhibit 826 is, again, the first and second floor plans of the COA units as a full building. And if we just move to 827, we can see a zoomed-in version of one typical layout. Again, this has not been amended at all since the previous previous approval. These are the same. Again, they're just grouped together. Lastly, we have the clubhouse. So if we could, Anthony, if I can trouble you to go to Exhibit 828. After consulting with our client and the community, we have enlarged the clubhouse, as Mr. Stevens described, from 2,278 square feet to 4,671 square foot footprint. The new clubhouse is approximately 51 feet deep and 97 feet wide, 27 feet tall, to the midline of the highest gable. The program is very similar to the previous clubhouse, just kind of enlarge each of the spaces. We feel that that's appropriate for a community the size. And we did add a conference room, but other than that, it's a very similar program to what was in the old clubhouse. At Exhibit A29, lastly, that's our architectural elevations. You can see that the reason for that 27-foot increase is that there's a single gable roof over the multi-purpose room, and That's just why the room got bigger, the roof got taller, that kind of thing. And stylistically, it really does blend with the rest of the development. We think it'll serve as a beautiful centerpiece to the community. And just for the record, we are proposing 2 wall signs, one at 57 square feet and one at 6 square feet. I can point those out. That's the large one, and there's a smaller one right over the front door. Donna, did I get everything?
I do, I think you hit it all.
And bravo, I liked how you used the word grouped instead of segregated or clustered. I thought that was.
Thank you.
Very
Some-
well. It makes much more sense now, having seen her plans, about why the roof is taller, and the fact that it's still not as tall as the buildings it fits, is what I'm trying to say, and not doing a good job. Mr. Peters, I just want to say thank you. Trying to see it from the back end and see it finished makes much more sense, to be honest with you, than thinking about, I can remember the original discussions, how it sounded great being integrated, but listening to Mr. Peters and then to explain if it has a 9-foot ceiling, it definitely, I can understand some of the issues that it would create. So I thank you for that. I think you did a good job helping me understand that, so thank you both. Any questions for Ms. Rubb?
Yeah.
Mr. Martins?
I second, so thank you. I understand the clubhouse a lot better now. And, everything that the chair. So density, how many people can be there at one time without a problem?
Sure, so if we can go back one sheet to Exhibit 828, the multipurpose room is our, main space, and that's 2,500 square feet. Code mandates that in a table and chairs configuration, we allocate 15 square feet per person. So if we do the math, it's about 166 persons at the maximum. And so we design egress, to comply with those.
Right. Okay. Yeah, and I'm just looking at, 166, so how many cars? The parking space thing again, but,
I just want to say the 166 number is, again, it's kind of a code allocation.
right.
That doesn't mean that, the room will be set up in a tight table and chairs configuration. That's 15 square feet per person, but it's unlikely that it be actually set up. It's kind of, the sign somewhere posted around here, maximum occupancy, that's where it comes from, so
Right.
it's a code number.
You might not want to be too close to the next person. Okay, it looks fine to me. Thank you. I
Sure.
appreciate the answer.
Any other questions for Ms. Rubb? Yes, Mr. Peters?
I have a couple. Your plans show an unfinished basement. Can you explain what uses, if any, would be permitted in an unfinished basement?
Right now, it's extra space. If the community decided to, the HOA decided to raise the funds and finish it, that's, going to be a building department, up to the building department's discretion. I imagine in the beginning, it'll be used for storage and the like. But again, as of now, being that it's unfinished, it's not really allocated for a specific use.
My concern is occupancy. If at some point the unfinished basement is meant to be occupied, the building's twice as big as it is on the plan currently, correct?
Yes.
So at that point, you require other things such as parking. So we're concerned, starts out as unfinished. We all know what happens when something starts out unfinished.
The intention is not to have another, a use down there as in gathering space. I don't think the ceiling height nor nor is that our client's intention.
Well, the reason I ask is it appears from your elevations on drawing Z2 that it's a 12-foot tall basement, correct?
Let me double check that. So that's, floor to floor. Without the, floor structure, I would say 10-foot ceiling in that room.
Okay. You would, in your direct testimony, and I apologize for asking questions at 9:40, 8:45 when everyone seems to like your project now, but we didn't get the plans until today. I haven't had a chance to review what you talked about, sign area for the building. Do you or your engineer have any idea if it complies with the municipal ordinance as it relates to building signage? The reason I ask, and Ms. Jennings will probably help me with this, if you're asking for a variance, we don't know what it is. So if you're telling us that the signage on the building will not require a variance, that's perfect. Otherwise, I can't comment on the building size till I review the ordinance against it. So if they tell us that the building signage is going to comply with the municipal ordinance, we're golden. If not, we need to verify that it doesn't require a variance.
Yes, I think what it requires is, with respect to square footage, we're fine. It's the limit is usually 1, and there's 2 signs.
Well, would that require a variance?
That would require a variance.
Okay. There we go. Thank you.
I didn't want to rehash the parking again, so thank you for bringing it up. I wondered that with the basement myself, so I was hoping one of you two were going to bring that up.
But again, we are significantly over parked on this site, so if they were ever in the future to go in for a building permit, let's say, has to get a zoning permit first. So that would be analyzed then, but right now, that's just speculation.
Well, again, our concern is if there's going to be a use, right now it says it's unfinished. At some point in time, are we going to ask the homeowners association to come back here when they decide they want to finish it?
I think they would have to get a zoning permit, but if they don't need any parking, that's what I'm saying, we're so overparked, I don't think it would trigger any use.
Any additional questions for Ms. Rowe? Anyone additional for Ms. Jennings?
No, that's all over direct testimony.
Would you like to make a closing statement now? I don't believe there's anybody in the public, but I'm going to open it to public session.
Yeah, just open to the public first, and then.
At this time, I'm going to open this to public session. Anyone wishing to come forward to comment on what you've heard this evening, please do so. Seeing no one come forward, we're going to close public session. Ms. Jennings, would you like to make a closing statement?
Just very quickly, because I think we kind of really vetted everything pretty well this evening. Again, this is just an amended preliminary and final major site plan. We're not touching the use variance. And then, of course, we're asking for the C variance for the height of the accessory clubhouse. And I guess I would amend my application to ask to allow the second sign. If the board doesn't want to allow us to have the second sign, we could certainly remove that now. And if in the future the client wants that second sign, they can come back, but I really think we're well under the square footage permitted under the ordinance. We just have 2 signs instead of 1 larger sign. So with that, I would just respectfully request that the board grant the approval.
Okay, board, it's up to us for discussion on the potential motion. Questions, comments?
Question. I might be confusing this with another application that we had, but wasn't there an issue of the mail delivery? That there was one spot where all the mailboxes and everybody had to come to that spot to pick up their mail?
I don't think that was this, but I do remember that, but I don't think that was this.
Is that an issue here?
They're doing cluster boxes.
I'm sorry,
It said they're doing cluster boxes.
cluster boxes
Mhm.
located in each one of the buildings or near?
Bill, you're going to have to come up.
Right, so the post office has really changed its rules. They're trying to push cluster boxes for all projects, period, but they certainly apply to multifamily projects. We had agreed to provide cluster boxes when we did this project, and that is what we're going to do.
And they're going to be throughout the development?
Correct, yes. My client says, I think you show them on your plan. I don't recall specifying where they're located, but we could certainly work that out with your professionals. It's a United States Postal Service requirement that we're agreeing to comply with. Nobody wants it. Everybody wants to fight it because we all want our mail delivered to our front door, and it's getting harder and harder to get that anymore.
Any other questions, discussion?
I like this project, the way that they presented it. The cluster building, we're just gonna have to live with. That's the way everything is going. And the changes certainly that they've made improve the property, and I would definitely vote to approve it. So if
Are
nobody,
you making us a motion?
no, unless somebody else has a comment, then I won't.
Any other comment?
I have similar thoughts. It seems to me like we're not really speaking to the variance itself as much as some of the conditions, and there are just some logistical reasons. Overall, some improvements. Otherwise, it's potato, or, so it seems to me to be very reasonable. They started construction, they ran into some logistical issues. Part of the building has basement, part of the building doesn't. 8-foot ceiling, 9-foot ceiling, and other similar things. And it's just some technicalities. That's what it seems like to me. We're not really speaking to anything material as it pertains to the actual variance that was granted. So I have similar sentiment that overall, just minor changes and/or improvements.
Would you like to make a motion?
Sure. I don't want to take Dr. Hofstein's
No,
motion.
that's fine. I would make the motions. I was just leaving it up to Mr. Murphy to have all the nitty-gritty stuff
Have anything else you want to
to
add?
be included.
Okay.
But
As I said, he didn't speak up, so I'm like, I guess there's nothing to add.
I would make a motion to approve the application.
I would agree as well. I think they did a great job, and Mr. Peters' clarification about the grouping really helped, and Ms. Rubb's explanation. My concern was the parking, but you are over-parked. So I would agree as well. So if it wasn't seconded, I would second the motion. Because I don't remember if it was.
I'm sorry, who was the motion? Dr. Hofstein? Okay. And Ms. Bradley, the second? Second it?
Yes, please.
You got it.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Hyman?
Yes.
Sorry.
It's okay. Dr. Hofstein? Yes. Mr. Hudak? Ms. Parnas?
Yes.
Ms. Rosal? Yes. Mr. Martins?
Yes.
Mr.
Wait,
Stafford
hold on.
Smith?
Excuse me, Mr. Martin, right? Well,
Yeah,
seven.
yeah, I said yes.
No, he's Mr. Martins is the alternate, correct?
Yeah, so I
So
don't know if I-
he doesn't vote tonight. I'm sorry, I should have been.
My
clear
apologies.
earlier.
I would have said yes anyway.
Voted yes anyway, we just don't count it.
Mr. Stafford Smith?
Yes.
Ms. Bradley?
Yes.
Great, thank you so much. Have a nice evening.
You too. Sorry about that.
Motion to close?
Motion to adjourn, all approved? Sorry about that. I should have addressed that
Meeting closed
earlier.
8:54.